want to welcome everyone to Schenectady City Hall and thank my colleagues in our neighboring cities, Mayor Sheehan in Albany, Mayor Madden in Troy. Also have in this deployment have been working with Mayor Richard David in Binghamton and Mayor Ben Walsh in Syracuse, both of which are doing press conferences on other topics right now or otherwise would be joining us. It's a problem that we all face in urban areas today is dealing with distressed and blighted property. The vacant property drives up our costs, it ties up our resources, and it has been a focus that I've had since being mayor and share that with my colleagues in our sister cities, and looking at ways that how we better deal with it, how we are able to stay ahead of the problem, and that there really was not a product on the market that allows us to monitor distressed and vacant properties. And it was a year ago, June, at the U.S. Conference of Mayors summer meeting where Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher brought in Nathan Armentrout, who his company, Casper Security, has developed what I believe is a unique product on the market today. It's something that fills the niche that we're all dealing with, and that we're excited to be deploying it in Schenectady and looking to do it with our sister cities in New York State and helping us deal with blighted, vacant, distressed property. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nathan to go over some of the technical details of the device and then go to my colleagues in our other corresponding cities. Nathan?
All right, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity here to be at this press conference and to be helping these cities in New York tackle and deal with the vacant property issues that are happening, not only just here, but across the country as well. We've heard from a number of different cities. This is a huge problem that we're all trying to deal with. So today we're here to celebrate the testing of a new innovation that combats many of the ills of vacant and abandoned properties. Historically, across the country, cities have limited number of options with dealing with vacant and abandoned properties. In recent years, innovations such as to policies and existing laws have given cities new tools such as land banks, property registries, and faster foreclosure processes. And make no mistake, these are really good tools to tackle blight, but they are all painfully slow and they're expensive endeavors that are hard to scale. Now, while these processes take time, millions of families nationwide they're left exposed to dangers happening right next door, and that's exactly the frustration that we're trying to tackle with Casper Security and where we got our start. In 2015, our hometown of Louisville, Kentucky, was having hundreds of vacant property fires per year. This was a huge problem because oftentimes the fires start in the middle of the night when families are sleeping. They would go unnoticed and spread next door, and a lot of things can happen with that. Families can lose their house. People die sometimes, and it's a catastrophic event for these families. So Louisville Metro government, they went looking for a solution and couldn't find one on the market. And instead of giving up, they did something unique. They hosted a civic innovation competition, normally called a hackathon. And that's where the three founders of Casper Security got started. We ended up winning that competition with a device called Casper, which was essentially a solar-powered smoke detector. The founders of Casper Security, we have continued to develop the original product. We've done 10 devices. We deployed 10 devices in Louisville a few years back, and then we met the Mayor McCarthy at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, where we pitched. And we've continued to kind of completely reinvent what Casper is, and to now what we're building as is a solar-powered home security system for vacant and abandoned properties. So in addition to kicking off in addition to the testing that we're doing here, we are also launching a 150-unit pilot in our hometown of Louisville, Kentucky. We are excited though, for the opportunity here because we are testing our latest and greatest innovations here in the state of New York with the cities behind me. And we hope that we are able to transform our success here into lasting protection and peace of mind for neighbors rapidly while current policies and tools continue to take effect. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce the great mayor of the city of Troy, Patrick Madden.
Thank you, Mayor McCarthy. Thank you for bringing this unique new technology to our attention. As Mayor McCarthy indicated, cities across the Northeast are plagued with vacant buildings. They are a problem for our public safety professionals. They are a problem for neighbors. They bring down property values. They're dangerous. They are scenes of vandalism and other nefarious activities, and they represent dangers in our community. That's been a vexing problem for all of our communities since the mortgage meltdown that commenced about 11 years ago. We struggle to deal with this. All of these properties, all of these buildings have a different history and a different reason why they ended up where they did, and moving them from vacancy status to productive use again requires very unique and individually crafted solutions. But until we get to that point, these properties are a danger in our communities, and this new utilization of technology is an opportunity for us to remove that danger while we're working on long-term solutions to these vacant and blighted properties. So we're very grateful to be included in this conversation, very interested in seeing how this works for us, and we thank Mayor McCarthy for bringing this to our attention and including us in this dialogue. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to have the mayor of the capital city here, who has unfortunately had to deal with some of the most serious events that have happened as a result of vacant and distressed property. Albany Mayor Kathy Sheehan.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary. And I parked in your parking spot, by the way. Force of habit, it said mayor's parking. So, but I really am so grateful for Mayor McCarthy's leadership on this. And you know, this event that the three cities are together working on an issue of vacant buildings should surprise no one. We came together a number of years ago to pitch a public arts grant. We won $1 million for a public arts project that was focused on vacant buildings in our cities. And one of the challenges with that project, Breathing Lights, was this vision of lights pulsating off and on in vacant buildings, but these were buildings that didn't have electricity. And one of the biggest challenges was the batteries that were required to keep those lights pulsating. And there were a lot of innovations around having community members go in and switch out the batteries when they died. And we knew that there was a real gap in technology to help us monitor these buildings. And so Mayor McCarthy didn't give up, and we've been talking about the need for a solution like this, and now we have found a solution that we're going to be testing in all three cities. The three of us, I think, leading again on this really important issue that, as Mayor Madden said, it impacts cities all across the Northeast. And so with this technology, we hope to be able to avoid tragedies like what happened on Myrtle Avenue in the city of Albany only a few weeks ago, where we had one vacant building, vagrants were getting in, the police would come and rouse them out, they would come back in, we would board it up, they would break in again, and unfortunately a fire started in that building. And there were 6 homes that were lost, including a home that had been in the same family for a century. And so we want to ensure that we're doing all that we can, and we need technology that is going to be able to withstand the conditions that exist in these buildings, the fact that there's no power in these buildings. And so we look forward to this test. And again, I want to commend my fellow mayors for their leadership. When we come together and work on projects like this, I think we innovate faster, we learn faster, and I'm looking forward to moving forward with this technology and seeing what it can do to help us to be more proactive in knowing what's going on inside these buildings and being able to be there quickly so that we can hopefully avoid the types of disasters that we've seen. It's devastating when you see these groups of homes burn because there's one on the block or one in that row of houses that is empty and that is a magnet for trouble. So thank you, Mayor McCarthy. Thank you, Mayor Madden.
And with that, we'd open it up for questions.
How many devices in each of the communities, and how do you decide which buildings get them?
Step up to the mic, whoever is going to answer that, please.
Again, at this point, we're not commenting on the specific number or the houses solely for security purposes to keep people guessing. It is initially a small deployment, but we're looking to ramp that up over the next few months. Again, working with Casper Security to modify, if necessary, any of the technical features of the device, and then also uniquenesses that will occur in each of the deployment sites.
How much money is each city willing to lay out?
Then you'd ask the device number, and you'd come back to your first question, how many devices we have. The device right now retails for $300, and then the monitoring fee is,
It's approximately $15 to $20 a month.
but depending on some of the features that are in place.
15 to 20 per device?
Yes.
And my goal is to, over the next few months, look to change our requirements within the Schenectady and other communities so that this will be required in every vacant building. So it's not only those that the municipality owns, but those that are privately owned, bank-owned, or in that general category of zombie properties, that they would have to have this monitoring device in place to create that level of deterrence and documentation for improper and illegal activity.
If solar needs sunlight, how will the device work? If the solar needs sunlight in order to work, how's that device?
The device hangs in the window.
How sensitive is it? I guess in other words, you don't want to have first responders come to find, maybe an animal inside or something like that.
Right, so the current plan is you would need one Casper device per house. That is the hub that has the cellular connection that gets the data up to the cloud. There's a number of other sensors that we can attach to the Casper platform, additional motion sensors. You could put in a number of smoke detectors in those buildings and detect events that way. The sensitivity of the microphone that's built into the device to pick up the smoke detectors is enough to hear within that house. So that's why you only need one.
So then how does it work? Does it send a signal to the police department, to the fire department, to 911?
Well, this is the really cool part, I think. We do all of the above and then some. Yes, it goes straight to emergency services, but one of the complaints that we heard about from neighbors when we've talked to issues, particularly in Louisville, they want to know when the fire happens, not when the fire truck gets there, right? Because there's a differential there. And so part of our platform is to be able to empower neighborhoods and communities to be aware of situations, dangerous situations that are happening next door. So we send email, phone calls, and text messages to neighbors who consent and want to get those alerts.
So even though the general public might not know which properties have them, the neighbors would.
That's
Yes, right now, yes. And in the short span here of what we're testing, we currently don't have the neighbor portal set up for them yet, but for Louisville, we're doing that.
In the middle of the night, if it goes off, people might be sleeping, they may not get the email.
Right, it could be a phone call or text message in addition to that. Right now, they get no notification until the fire truck's there, and that's what causes people to get injured and lose their lives, and of course, the house next door.
Now, does the device have a smoke detector, or does it pick up?
It picks up the smoke detector siren.
They're in the house already.
Yeah, and when we sell a package to the cities that includes 2 smoke detectors right now, so they go in and replace ones that don't work currently.
Question for any of the mayors, how do you gauge the success of this program? How long might it take to gauge that success?
We don't want,
Mics, please. Anyone?
it's a new device, a new process, but we know today how many illegal entries we have into properties. And sometimes I should say we don't even know that. There's multiple times where properties are broken into. And we also know how many working fires we have that result in significant damage to the property. So the goal is to have 0 of those events. And I believe this lays the foundation where that is obtainable over, whether it's going to be 24 months or 36 months. If you have a full citywide deployment of this, people know that the devices are there, that we're going to be able to appropriately have the police interact, the fire departments interact, where it will stabilize the value of the property and eliminate the negative events that happen within the properties.
So does this take the place of the city's program to raise the dilapidating buildings?
No. There's still some structures that are beyond the point of salvage in all our communities, and those still fit the category that of demolition becomes unfortunately, the first option or the last option to deal with it.
Now, without getting specific, can you characterize the type of structure that will be getting these buildings? Will these be the worst, the ones with the X on them, or will they be properties that might someday be able to be rehabilitated?
Again, my personal preference would like it in all the buildings, but some of that is just part of the discussion now. Where do you do that initial deployment? You put it in buildings maybe of higher value, looking at ones that may have been subject to more active improper or illegal entry. There's other things going on, and so until you can ramp up to a full citywide deployment, it'll be each of us making those respective decisions within our communities that we think will best serve those needs.
Question for the fire chief. Just last week, not even, a week ago, it's Thursday night, we had a fire on Eagle Street that was in a vacant building. I mean, how made this divisive change to the situation you ended up having to deal with there, where there was fire throughout the building?
Okay, so I want to back up just a little bit to kind of reiterate on early detection. We talk about the neighbors being concerned, which is obviously warranted. Early intervention is the key here. With vacant buildings, we don't have a report of fire until it's shown from the building. It's any time of day, okay? If we're able to get the notification, just like in any other home, where the detector goes off early and we're notified, that's not a large fire. We're able to get in, knock the fire down, and let's go earlier than that. Somebody breaks into a building, we're notified. They don't have the chance at that point to start a fire. Or maybe that fire's accidental. Somebody's trying to keep warm. But as soon as they make entry into the building, we're notified, or law enforcement's notified. There's no chance for vandalism. They can't steal the copper pipes. They can't do any of these things that negatively affect these buildings. So the key here is early intervention. If anybody, again, makes entry, we're aware of it, that stops it right there. There's no large fires, there's no vandalism, there's not, illegal activity in the building at that point. And that's the key here. And as far as to your point, the other day, again, early intervention. If we know somebody's in a building, the police department's called, and at that point, that stops our issue right there at that point, very early on.
How many vacant properties do we have in each of your cities, vacant and abandoned properties?
The number we're using in Schenectady now is a little over 624.
We have a few less than 600 in the city of Troy, but I do think the applicability of this sort of technology goes beyond just your traditional vacant, abandoned building. There are also many buildings that are under construction, under active construction. If you reflect back in August, we had a terrible fire in Troy, a warehouse building that was about 85% completed. They've gone back and needed to gut the building because the fire got a start before anybody was notified. So this has applicability in those sorts of situations as well. It's not just our vacant and neglected buildings, but it might be buildings that are under construction and vacant on weekends.
What about buildings foreclosed by the bank? How will you get the monitoring system in there?
It would be part of the requirement for a vacant house registry in Schenectady that it be a requirement these devices be deployed in those buildings.
So we have between 900 and 1,000 in the city of Albany. And I say that because there's a difference between the number that are registered and when we go out and I did a walk through the Mansion neighborhood in Albany just yesterday, looking at vacant properties that are registered, and oftentimes you walk by a property and you can see that it looks like it's empty. There's a lockbox on the door, and so figuring out what's going on inside that building is a challenge. And I think to the point about zombie properties, really basically any property where the power is cut, we want to know about that. And so we want to make sure that we have these monitors in place. But the other piece of this is turning off the tap. So we have properties that exist, that have been empty. Some of them have been empty for decades, where we can deploy this technology. But I think the other piece of turning off the tap is requiring that the owners of properties that become empty have to pay for the device and the monitoring of that device, pay the city for that, because we want to continue to have disincentives for properties to be vacant for long periods of time. And unfortunately, for a whole host of reasons and different reasons in different cities, that's how we got to where we are. So I think one of the things that we're interested in knowing about this technology is in these tests, protecting those vacant buildings that are problematic, but then also, does it help us to turn off the tap? And does it help us in deterring people from entering these buildings because they know that they're being monitored? And so the vagrancy and the challenges that our police face and our first responders face when approaching these buildings, can we change the trajectory of that? Because we now know that people are not inside that building because we're able to monitor it more closely.
So then does the municipality have sole discretion over where these devices go, or can a homeowner who lives near a vacant building request one?
At this point, we're just testing these. So this is a test, it's very limited, and we need to make sure that our first responders have been trained on them. We need to understand how they work, what devices we may want to include with them. So, they have a number of various features. So at this point, we are testing them, and we're looking forward to seeing the results of that and then determining how we would best deploy them in the future.
Is there a time frame on the test period, 1 year, 2 years?
Really looking at ongoing, so it becomes a matter of months for that initial test and the ability to put more of the devices in the field.
Is there any cybersecurity concern or risk involved with installing these? And if so, how is that being addressed? I think Nathan probably.
Right, absolutely. That's a great question. Our other two founders in Casper Security both work in the computer security industry, and so that is definitely on the forefront of our mind. We implement, especially with embedded devices, that's the type of product this is. Security has been a bigger issue as vulnerabilities are found. You combat it by doing layers of encryption on all the different layers in the technology stack. And so we're cognizant of that, yes.
And is there like a specific, I know you can't tell specifically where, but a specific area in Albany and Troy where we'll be using them? Like near the Myrtle Avenue area, or?
So far, they've been scattered throughout the city, so far as I can tell. I'll let Mayor McCarthy touch on that.
Again, it's at the discretion of the individual mayors work. Our goal is full deployment, but in the initial ramp up, we want to test to see what works, what the reaction is, and also create the impression that we've deployed more than we actually have, so you're getting that deterrence from people who may be choosing to engage in improper or illegal conduct.
If we could go back for a second to the discussion about receiving the notifications for break-ins and fires and stuff like that, particularly for residents living near the abandoned buildings. You said that's an opt-in. Is that through an app, or is it some other notification that then comes to their phone or their email address?
Right, so when we go do the installation, we leave a placard on the door, and if we can find the neighbors next door, if we want to say hi to them. I think it's important to get them involved and get them engaged with this, because we're also trying to empower them. We want them to be aware of what's happening next door so they can take defensive actions as they need to. They get a code, a one-time use code, to register with the house next door. They'll get that alert specifically. And then we have to check in on them every year and say, do you want to continue receiving alerts? Pretty standard stuff, I think.
So it is kind of still contingent on them having some sort of smart device in order to receive that information?
Potentially. And we can work with other technologies. We've heard other cities ask us before, well, could you put an alarm for the neighbors next door, a little connected box perhaps with a siren in there? I think that's in the realm of possibility, but we'll have to go city by city and kind of understand like what the needs are and what's going to make everybody happy.
Are the devices in place now, or are we still in the process of deciding where they're gonna go?
We're currently in the process of installing them right now. We have a few installed currently. That's part of being up here is we're going through the installation process right now.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.